And so we're still waiting for a few people to join us, but I'm really happy to see so many people here tonight. My name is Bhante Akaliko. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a queer Buddhist monk and the founder of Rainbodhi LGBTQIA+ Buddhist community. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you all. Just as we're waiting for more people to arrive, a little bit of Dharma Zoom etiquette. It's really good that you're all here. We'd love to hear from you in the chat. Please make sure your microphones are muted for most of the session. We'll have a chance to talk and interact later on. And please remember that this is a Dharma session. This is an opportunity for us to hear the Dharma and perhaps even attain some wisdom, maybe even liberation. So please treat this space that we're in now like a virtual Dharma hall. So try to minimize your distractions and turn off some devices except the one you're using, and to be still and silent and mindful whilst we're here together today. Such a unique opportunity and such a great chance to develop mindfulness in the Dharma. So I just want to mention we've had over 100 registrations for this event and for some of our future events. And it just goes to show that there is a real need for the LGBTQIA+ community to hear the Dharma in a safe and supportive environment. And I want you to all know that whoever you are, whatever your gender, whatever your sexuality, whatever your various identities are, you're welcome here and you belong. You are accepted and you are loved just as you are. So before we introduce our very special guest speaker, I'd like for you to meet some of our Rainbodhi volunteers who are going to take us through the event tonight. So tonight's format is we'll have an acknowledgement of country and a little bit more about Rainbodhi. Then we'll introduce our speaker who will give a Dharma talk and meditation. We'll have a breakout space and we'll have a chance for some sharing with the group later on. So that's enough from me. Please be aware that this session is being recorded. Please turn your cameras on if you're comfortable. And if you're not comfortable, please leave your cameras off. It's no problem. And now I'd like to hand over to a great friend of Rainbodhi's, Phap Hai, will give an acknowledgement of country.
Thank you, Bhante Akaliko. Can I just say how grateful I am to be here, stepping into this virtual meditation hall with everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your presence. So I'd like to begin our meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians and leaders of the land on which we gather today. So for those of us who are not in Australia, the acknowledgement of country is something really important as the significance of reconciliation in the history of Australia and in the spirit of acknowledging the traditional custodians of the country. So where I am today, it's the Yugambeh Bundjalung Nation where I'm sitting. And so I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to all the Kumanberri and Bundjalung people past and present and future of the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. And also acknowledging the many Aboriginal people from other regions, as well as Torres Strait and South Sea Islander people who now live in the local area. And where I am here is a crucial place for bush food, harvesting, hunting, and fishing traditionally. Where I am is Burleigh Heads in Gold Coast specifically. So thank you, everyone. And may I also invite us to hold in our minds the First Nations people and the lands, wherever you are, the first people who have set foot on the lands on which you sit or stand. And let's extend this respect to the leaders past, present, and future. Thank you.
And I'll just say a few words about Rainbodhi, LGBTQIA plus Buddhist community. So we're a spiritual friendship group that started here in Australia, and we're an advocate for inclusion and diversity in the Buddhist community and in society more broadly. I'd like you to know that Rainbodhi accepts everyone, regardless of gender, sexuality, regardless of faith, regardless of sect or affinity to a particular Buddhist school. So we're non-sectarian. We welcome teachers and people from all different Buddhist traditions and all different faiths. All our events are always free, and I'll talk a little bit more about our upcoming events later on. And now I'd like to ask our good friend Key to introduce our special speaker.
Hi everyone. Happy Mardi Gras. It's for our friends abroad. It's our Gay Pride Month in February, ending like this weekend in a huge celebration. So yeah. So thanks for joining us. And I'd like to thank Brother Phap Hai for being here with us. I'm really grateful that that he's giving us his time so generously. Brother Phap Hai is a senior student of Thich Nhat Hanh, and Brother Phap Hai was originally from Australia, but has been living in Plum Village monasteries across the world. I first met him about 5 or 6 years ago when he returned to Australia for a visit and went to this place called the Buddhist Library in Sydney for a talk. And then I didn't see him again until March last year when he came for a visit, and was fortunate to have been on a retreat with him just literally like 1 or 2 weeks before Sydney lockdown because of COVID. And he has stayed in Australia since then because we're not allowed to leave the country because of COVID. And while he's been here, he's started up a new monastery called Mountain Spring Monastery, which is about an hour out of Sydney. And at the start of COVID, he also started leading a new online Sangha called the Compassion Ocean Sangha. And it's pretty amazing. Like we were meeting practically every night at the start of lockdown, which I think I personally know quite a few people who are very grateful for the Sangha. And I've got to know him better over the year through the Sangha, and I'm glad to know him now as a dear friend, as a brother, and as a teacher. And I look forward to listening to his talk on the Relentless Heart. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brother Phap Hai.
Thank you so much, Ki, and thank you so much to Venerable Akaliko and to Rainbodhi for inviting me to share together with everybody this evening. I'm absolutely delighted to have a chance to sit and to practice with everybody this evening. I've really been looking forward to this chance. And so to begin our evening together, I'd like to invite everybody to find ourselves in a comfortable position, a position that we feel completely relaxed, we feel alert, we're able to come home to our bodies. We're going to begin our evening with just a few moments of guided sitting meditation. So take a moment just to consider your posture, consider your external environment. Just take a moment to run through that checklist. Is the gas off on the stove? Is the door locked if we need to lock the door, and so on? All of those things that can pull us away from being present for this intimate experience of our breath, of our bodies. And take a moment to allow yourself to arrive in your body just by establishing your posture, perhaps noticing if you have a firm foundation, if you're sitting on a cushion, noticing if your two knees are in contact with the earth. If you're sitting on a chair, perhaps noticing if your 2 feet are in contact with the floor. And then what I like to do once I've established a firm foundation is to rock my body back and forth slightly, partially because it's fun, and also because as I do that, I invite a sense of uprightness to my spine. I invite the vertebrae to rest one on top of the other. I notice that as I do this, I've actually usually prior to this been hunching down a little bit. So I invite a sense of uprightness to my spine, and I roll my shoulders back slightly to open my heart space. And then I rest my hands in my lap and gently close my eyes. And I take a moment just to choose my meditation object. This evening, we're going to be doing a meditation of coming back to our senses. And then we're going to be focusing on our breathing this evening, this intimate experience of our breath. So I put aside all of the experiences I've had today or any expectations that I might have for experiences that are coming up. And I allow myself and invite myself to be here for this intimate, unadorned experience, just as it is. And I invite you to take a moment to become aware of any sounds that present themselves to you in this moment. There might be loud sounds, there might be soft sounds, there might be almost silent sounds. So just become aware of the whole kaleidoscope of sound present for you right now. And notice if you're drawn to some sounds, calling them pleasant, and you find other sounds perhaps unpleasant, or you feel some aversion towards them, simply generating a sense of curiosity to your experience as it is with sound. And slowly and gently, when it feels like the right moment for you, allow your awareness of sound to sink gently into the background. You can bring your attention to any fragrances, odors, or smells that make themselves known to you in this moment. Noticing if you find some smells or odors pleasant, or you find others unpleasant. Just becoming curious about that experience of the many layers of fragrance and odor present for you right here and right now. And then once again, slowly and gently, taking your time, we can allow our awareness of fragrance and odor to sink into the background. And we'll invite a sense of awareness and presence to the sensations of our body at this moment in time. Perhaps beginning by directing your awareness to the strongest sensation that you noticed in your body at this moment. For many of us, that might be the weight of our body on the chair or on the cushion. Just exploring, engaging that sense of curiosity and interest. And perhaps noticing some more subtle sensations, such as perhaps the weight of our forearms or our hands in our lap. Perhaps noticing the difference in temperature of different parts of our body, the parts of our body covered with clothes, those parts of our body that are exposed to the air. You might notice sensations such as itching or tickling or prickling arising and passing away. Or you might even be aware of some internal sensations in your body. So just coming home to your body as it is, noticing if you're drawn to some sensations, or you find other sensations neutral or perhaps unpleasant. And as you continue to be aware of your body in terms of sensation, I invite you to generate a sense of awareness and presence to the expansion and contraction of your body with your breath, aware of the physical sensations of expansion on the in-breath and contraction on the out-breath. Not changing your breath in any way, but simply generating a sense of awareness to a process that is continuing in and of itself. Breathing in, this is an in-breath, just as it is. Breathing out, this is an out-breath, just as it is. As we generate this sense of awareness of our breath, we slowly zoom in to our experience of the breath. At the same time as focusing in on our breath in a general sense, let's also engage this sense of curiosity, bringing the same kind of attention to our breath that we would bring to meeting a dearly beloved friend that we haven't met, we haven't seen for a long time. That sense of interest, of curiosity, of delight, of exploration. So as we become aware of our in-breath and our out-breath, we explore slightly. We notice the sensations of our breath, perhaps at the tip of our nostril, inside our nose and our sinuses, down the back of our throat, all the way down our windpipe, until our belly expands on the completion of an in-breath, to that brief pause in between an in-breath and an out-breath, and then becoming aware of all the sensations of an out-breath, perhaps noticing the difference in temperature, in texture, just exploring our breath in different ways. As we continue our exploration, you might like to explore different parts of your body and notice how your breath affects different parts of your body. You might notice it again through expansion and contraction. You might notice as you breathe in, various parts of your body, your shoulders, your arms, even it can feel like your pelvis and your legs are expanding. And on the out breath, you can feel the contraction, feeling the sensations through the whole of your body. So aware of our whole body with our breathing, we breathe in. Aware of our whole body with our breathing, we breathe out. So dear beloved community, we can gently and slowly emerge from our meditation, taking our time, perhaps rolling our shoulders or flexing our hands, turning our head from side to side, or even massaging our face, our legs, our hands a little if we need to. Just returning to a more everyday form of awareness while also continuing this sense of presence, this sense of embodiment, the sense of being, of inhabiting our senses. So dear beloved community, it's an absolute joy to have an opportunity to sit together with all of you this evening. As I shared earlier, I've very much been looking forward to sharing and sitting with Rainbodhi. I think Key was sharing that it's quite unexpected that I have an opportunity to be here in my homeland. I was expected to be in Australia for just a short visit for family. And during that visit last year, I agreed to offer a retreat. And that retreat turned into unexpectedly founding a new monastery. So looks like we're here for the duration, and it's a wonderful privilege. It's a wonderful gift to have the chance to practice here and to have the opportunity to learn from so many wonderful people and communities here. I can't wait until we all have the chance to physically be together and have a wonderful rainbow retreat. I'm really looking forward to that opportunity. When I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, I was reading some of the emails that I've received over the last month or so, since I gave a series of 4 different talks for communities for queer communities around the world, both in retreat and just as talks. Many people had heard one or another of the talks or sections of the talks and had asked for copies of those talks or for me to give other talks. And I thought, this is a great opportunity to share some of those things that I've shared with other communities. So I'll be doing that this evening. And I was thinking about, in particular, a phrase that we use a lot in Plum Village, and it's on a lot of t-shirts and posters. It really came to my mind. And that phrase is, be beautiful, be yourself. A lot of people wear these t-shirts in Plum Village, and it's a lovely notion. It's an important practice. But to me, it's also a reminder of how far we still have to go. To publicly be beautiful and to be yourselves up until now has not usually ended well for the LGBTQIAP community. To be absolutely ourselves in every circumstances sounds nice. But we in the queer community know that being ourselves in every circumstance can have real and sometimes, or even depending on the country and place and society we live in, often dangerous implications. So this is a hard one. This is actually a big one for the queer community. The space to be allowed to be ourselves. This self, which is an ever-changing experience and which we're constantly and continually exploring as practitioners. This is where the real and transformative work on the individual and societal level also is. To be beautiful, to be yourself, means to be absolutely authentic, to bring all parts of ourselves to the table in each and every moment. And for me, that is what a real practitioner does. One of our great ancestors in the queer community, Audre Lorde, once said that we need to be aware of others who choose to define us to ourselves and not to accept those definitions. That's fierce. The queer community reclaims that right to define ourselves to ourselves over and over. To keep exploring what that means. And in my opinion, that is also the essence of the Buddha's path. To keep exploring over and over again who we are. To discover who our real self is below the words and the ideas, the notions and the concepts, that secret, vulnerable place for which we don't have words, just a knowing. Speaking of fierceness, there's a great, short, fierce story that's told in the Pali Canon. And that's a story of a nun, Soma, who's approached by Mara, the personification of illusion. Mara tries to define her and put her in a box. He says, you are so-and-so, this and that. Soma replies, anyone who's caught in the idea I'm a woman or a man or I'm anything at all, that's who you're fit to address. Then Mara, who was sad and dejected at realizing that Soma the nun knows me for what I am, vanished right there. How fierce is that? We've been told by others that we're so many things constantly. And many of those words have not been beautiful. Sometimes some of us have wanted to scream from the depths of silence that we've had to hold. Many of us have internalized that message and that shame. We have been, and we continue to be victims of violence, but it seems to me that the most subtle level of violence, that which is most difficult to transform, is the violence we do to ourselves when we internalize those external messages and we say those words to ourselves and we say them to each other. In one of the key texts in the Mahayana tradition, in my own tradition, that text is called The 8 Realizations of Great Beings. We read that an authentic practitioner is one who practices to befriend all things, even that which we might be ashamed of. There's a deep and natural human tendency to run away from pain and towards happiness. But one of the fundamental insights of Buddhism is that within this samsaric realm, suffering, pain, discomfort, it's inherent. It's a mark of existence. It's part of the way things are. Our pain, our suffering, if we know how to hold it well, rather than being an obstacle or an object to be gotten rid of, can be a noble messenger that calls us forth. Our suffering and our pain, to me, is in fact the very ground for the wisdom and the healing that we're called to bring to ourselves and to the world. Insight doesn't fall from the sky. It would be great if it did, but it manifests right from the heart of our pain, from our real experience. Choosing to love ourselves just as we are is a radical act, perhaps one of the most radical of all. Many of us have grown up with the idea that we're broken, we're sinful, we're wrong, and so on. And this is, to me, where the Buddha's teaching is really radical, because the Buddha always reminded us that the practice of a meditator is about uncovering that which has been there all along, deep within. What's deep within you, beyond words and notions, is beautiful. In Buddhism, there's a practice that I don't hear teachers speaking about very often. And I'm surprised about this on one level, but also not surprised at all on another, given our human tendency to think of ourselves as something or a project that needs to be fixed. This practice is called anumodana, and the Buddha recommended it for strengthening our courage and gladdening our mind. He recommended that we should spend time, I like to recommend every day, as often as possible, since the root of our ill will to ourselves is very deep. Perhaps even at the beginning of many of your meditations, to reflect on and celebrate your good qualities. What a powerful thing to do, to focus on the precious gift that you are. This is perhaps the most difficult practice of all, and yet it is very transformative. It's transformative to recognize once and for all that rather than being broken, we're beautiful even though we might be in pieces. When I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you today, I kept returning to the 2 Qs that are in the acronym LGBTQIA. In Buddhism, there's a metaphor of a raging stream, which is more of a torrent, really. When I think of this torrent, I remember years ago when the brothers went on their first canoeing outing, the monastic brothers. We were canoeing down the river. It was the Dordogne River. Or actually, it was the Vézère, which feeds into the Dordogne in the south of France. And the brother who was in the canoe with me said, "Brother Phap Hai, lay down and take a rest. I'll row for a while." So I laid down and I napped. It was really a lovely experience after having rowed for a day and a half. And suddenly our canoe was caught in some rapids and I was flung out of the boat. I didn't know which way was up or down, and I began thrashing around. I was disoriented. And after thrashing around for a while, I realized that the first thing I needed to do was to stop struggling against myself, to try to relax right in the middle of that whirlpool, to let the stream be the stream. And that way I'd slowly figure out what to do. And so I did that, which was the last thing I wanted to do. I let my body go limp. And a few seconds later, I broke the surface. Letting our bodies go limp in the middle of a whirlpool outside or a whirlpool inside, is the last thing that we often do. But this is not the same as surrender. It's a choice to understand, to gain clarity, and to be able to take a breath. For many of us, just the possibility to be able to take a breath, to be able to rest for a moment, can seem like an incredible luxury when it seems like the whirlpool, the raging torrent of homophobia, of self-hatred, of shame, of the continual microaggressions is present everywhere. Or when we hear that word, which is too often directed to us or at us, acceptance. I accept you. When will we come to a moment in which there's not just a grudging acceptance of the community, but a celebration? When, like me in the story I just shared, will the queer community be able to break the surface of the raging water and to take a breath? Because many of us are tired. So many of us have internalized this war. And so many of our community, especially our young, think the world would be a better place if they were not in it. So rather than being a surrender or a passive acceptance, letting our body go limp in the middle of the raging torrents inside and outside is to give up the fight against ourselves or internalizing the messages that we receive from others, and to acknowledge our capacity to kick out and swim forward in the direction that the insight that each of us carries in our bodies leads us to go. And this is a radical act of self-love, of you saying to yourself, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm able to do this. I can take another step. In Buddhism, we speak of this raging torrent within and around that's flowing in one direction. And that our real and fundamental work as meditation practitioners is to swim against the stream. This mirrors the experience and the path of the queer community, doesn't it? Of swimming against the stream. But rather than being a weakness, in Buddhism, we see this as our power. As the condition for the arising of insight. It's the gift and healing that we can bring to ourselves and to the world, even if hundreds of times a day we might wish for any other path or any other gift. Most of the time, I want to be real here, most of the time to engage in this real work is hard. It's painful, it's raw, and it's heartbreaking. Our broken hearts and our broken spirits can collapse in on themselves, as has happened to so many in the community and our young, or they can break us open. For some of us, there can even be a question of why do we need to be the ones who do the majority of the healing work? Why don't others do some of the work sometimes, or even a little bit? Why does it always have to be us? Healing is hard, and we can engage in this as a kind of war, thrashing about, but we're just going to tire ourselves out and we won't actually get that far. Or we can soften our body, our heart, and relentlessly keep moving forward. If there's one word in English that I would choose to describe the queer community, it's relentless. The definition of relentless is continuing in a determined way without any interruption. Now, that's also the heart of meditation, isn't it? That's also the heart, the very essence of being queer. To identify as queer means to not settle for what others tell you, or for that matter, what you tell yourself. To not settle for one definition. To be continually exploring new aspects of yourself and of life. And this is the very definition of courage, the very definition of relentless. So to me, I want to share that I feel that each of us is the very definition of courage. When we're subjected to grudging acceptance as long as we keep quiet. When, like friends of mine, we're refused service. When we are misgendered. When we're told we're not normal, going to hell, when families disown us, when we lose our jobs, or when we remain silent. We internalize that hatred, hating ourselves, feeling ashamed of ourselves, and hating and shaming that part of ourselves that we see in each other, and that's not okay. Our wonderful ancestor, Audre Lorde, once said, "My own silences had not protected me. Your silence will not protect you." We as individuals and as a community are silenced in so many ways. And that silence is rewarded for many of us at most by a grudging acceptance. But this internal and external silence is one of the most violent things. And it's one of the reasons that I feel that many of us can't breathe. There are many silences to be broken, both through our words, but also in our actions, and most importantly, in our thoughts. Many of us constantly choose to remain silent and choose not to engage in acts of self-revelation because we know very well what can and has happened when we speak, when we reveal who we really are. Whether through our words, the way we walk, the music we like, any number of things. But in this, over time, we end up feeling like me when I was trapped under the water, in desperate need of air. Just one breath. Because first and foremost, the one to whom we most need to communicate is ourselves. The deepest silencing that we can experience is that internalized alienation from our real selves. The struggle to not only embrace, but to celebrate all parts of ourselves just as we are, regardless. I've been thinking about a conversation that I had recently with one of my teachers. She said, we don't want special treatment. We don't want anything extraordinary. We simply want to be able to go about our everyday lives without having to look over our shoulders physically or metaphorically. This is being relentless. I will not give up. I will not betray myself into small comforts, mistaking them for real security. So that was the first cue that came to me when I was thinking about what I wanted to share this evening. The essence of being queer, of always moving forward, of not settling, of moving forward and exploring new boundaries all the time. The other cue is questioning. The willingness to question all of our assumptions and beliefs, the ways we do things and the things that we hold dear. It's fundamental to the spiritual life, and it's fundamental to queerness. To be in that place of not taking things for granted, of being willing to embark and to remain for the whole of our lives on a journey of discovery of what this thing that we call the world is, of what we are, and of what our real situation is. It means to choose not only once, but over and over again to not run away. For most of us, though, it has to be said, our path began with a sudden or a gradual discovery of what I like to call an inconvenient truth about ourselves, about what we really feel. Inconvenient because it was probably against the stream. But being willing to show up for what's truly there, regardless of what it is the very foundation of meditation practice and the very basis of any meaningful and transformative spiritual life. A real spiritual life is a continual practice of exploring who we really are. And more importantly, being absolutely authentic to that discovery. And that's not easy. The practice of meditation has many fruits, but one of the most important is that as we develop this capacity of showing up for a breath, showing up for a step, showing up for an emotion, showing up for another person, for the world, and for this ever-changing experience that we call ourselves, we learn not to be afraid anymore. There are said to be two ways to deal with fear and challenging situations. The first practice is a practice that my teacher, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, calls changing the peg. This is an old metaphor in Vietnam and in traditional temple architecture. They didn't use nails like we use these days, but they used wooden pegs. Some of you might have been to Korea or Japan or even to Vietnam and seen the old temples and monasteries that are built with wood and these wooden pegs. Over time, the peg becomes rotten and you need to push it out and replace it with another peg so that the building will remain solid. So if it's a metaphor for if it's too much to handle, then we go and we do something that we find nourishing and healing. Until we're able to handle that situation. But for this to be meaningful, it can only ever be a first step. It can't be a final resting place, otherwise it's a practice of avoidance, of spiritual bypassing. And so many people have a master's degree in avoidance. In fact, many people would actually call this spirituality. They would call it ascendance or transcendence, the continual running away from what is. The first practice of changing the peg is a practice to undertake to resource ourselves for the second aspect of the practice, which is to turn towards the demon outside, but equally the demon within, and to befriend it, to understand that this in fact, is your greatest teacher who's come to you in an unexpected form. And that if we're solid, if we're clear, then hidden in this situation is great wisdom. Because of the situation that we've all been through, that we continue to go through, one of the hardest things for all of us is to be vulnerable, to really show our hearts. We've had to build up quite elaborate safety mechanisms in order to simply survive. As meditation practitioners, our practice is to be present for and to feel our heart, to feel what we feel, to be present and embodied and inhabiting our experience. Once we can do this for ourselves, we can do this for others. So we discovered an inconvenient truth indeed, but one that if we handle it well, if we take it as the radical invitation that it is our pathway of healing. And the thing is, if we're lucky, as a serious meditator, we'll continually be discovering inconvenient truths about ourselves, all the world around us. And that's what spiritual practice, or for that matter, queerness, is all about. Being willing to show up for what is, for what's real and for what's true. And then to not settle, to not think that we've reached the ultimate, to be willing to let that go, just like a tree needs to let go of the growth of this year, the leaves of this year. Here in Australia, we're entering autumn already, and up here in the Blue Mountains, the leaves are starting to change color. The trees have to let go of those leaves, those insights, those discoveries of this year in order for next year's growth to come in. This continual practice of discovery and of letting go and of keeping on going. A few years ago, at a retreat held in California called Many Streams, One Source, which was for people of color and the LGBTQIA community, one young queer friend of color asked a question that many of us have. How can I honor my ancestors in me when my ancestors would have hated me and probably wanted me dead? There were a few moments of poignant silence, and then a voice spoke up and said, "Then take mine." This is the real power of community. This is the power of being held, of being able to zoom out just a little, to be able to connect with each other through our shared wound, through our shared dreaming. For me, I actually live that every day within my own body. I also had a lot of trouble for a long time embracing ancestors. Touching our roots is a very big practice in Plum Village. And I had some trouble with that for a long time. Many of my ancestors, both ethnically and spiritually, were at war with each other. I carry these stories and these wars within myself. This sense of if I honor one group of ancestors, then the other ones are diminished. Understanding that my story is not only my own, but in some way it's part of the collective and it's a continuation of my ancestors' story, of this land's story, is important. We continue these stories within ourselves. So this work of reconciliation of all the seeming opposites, to be able to honor all the parts of myself, is my work. So for a long time, I saw all of these radical differences as a weakness, but I no longer look at it that way. To be able to zoom out and to bring forth the power from all of the intersectionalities is a source of power. This is the process of spiritual archaeology. So take my ancestors is a practice that I really feel we need to do in the queer community as individuals and as a collective. So who are our ancestors within the queer community and what are their stories? How do you live out these stories in your own body and in your own life? What were their sources of power? And how do these sources of power play out in your own life? And who are the collective queer ancestors? We need to speak their names. We need to claim those sources of power. And how do their stories connect with your own? And how do you continue these stories? Can you allow them to be a source of power and strength for you? Almost all of the teachings of the Buddha came about because somebody asked a question. As practitioners, and moreover as members of the queer community, we're also questioning people. This is the other Q in the LGBTQIAP acronym. We always want to be working our edge and not settling back into a false sense of complacency. This is taking ownership of your path, not the path, but your path of spiritual maturity. It can be helpful to reflect on what's the edge of your practice in this moment. What's the teaching that you need to hear that will help you to unlock your situation? And yes, we're tired. Sometimes we just need to breathe out. Most of us tonight probably just want to breathe out. This is good. But resting, allowing ourselves to be held, is quite different from being complacent. I had a young friend who, like quite a number of people, I think, is a comedian in LA. And he hadn't come to our monastery, Deer Park, for quite a while. It was a few months. And before then, he'd been quite a regular visitor. When he started coming again, I asked him where he'd been. And he told me something that I felt was incredibly important. He said, Brother Phap Hai, I realized that when I would come to the monastery to be on retreat, I would be blissed out and loving every minute. And then I'd go home and this energy would fade away. And then I'd have to start all over again. I'd come back to the monastery for a fix. I realized that in a way, I was behaving like an addict. I was becoming a bliss junkie. And so I needed to be able to get real and to not come to retreats in the spirit of a bliss junkie getting my fix, but to come to retreats and meditation groups and meditate in such a way that was connected with my life, that was carried into every moment of my life. And I felt that this young friend of mine had an amazing insight, had an amazing insight of the importance of allowing each moment of our life to be our place of practice, each moment of our life to be our cushion, each moment of our life to be a moment where we can open our heart just a little bit more and not think that we constantly need to be in special circumstances. So in the spirit of this second cue, let me ask you, what were the causes and conditions that brought you to sit there today? Why are you a practitioner? What brought you to meditation? Not only 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, but right now. What is it that you're looking for in this moment? If you ask yourself that question, what answer emerges? What am I looking for in this moment? Or why am I a practitioner? It might be an answer such as peace, or liberation, or happiness. Now, I have to stop here for a minute because for most of us, like in the world, we don't even ask this question. So to be asking this question is already a great thing. But even if we ask this question, we're lucky enough to ask it, then many of us just stop with the word that arises, peace or liberation or happiness. And we stop right there and we don't consider what that word actually means, what our experience of peace is, what our experience of happiness is. and so on. What's your concept of, or perhaps your experience of liberation or enlightenment? If you are able to sink into your embodied experience of that word, then there's more of a chance you might be able to recognize it in each and every moment. And we live in this delusion that everybody thinks that peace or happiness or so on is the same thing. It's not the case. I love to tell the story of when my young brother came to visit me in our monastery in Southern California. We hadn't seen each other for a very long time. We were orphaned as children, and we were separated out to different families. So it had been quite a while since we'd seen each other. And he came to the monastery, and I said, "What would you like to do?" And he said, "I want to go to Universal Studios with you." And I thought, oh God, no. Like, I'm not going to Universal Studios. So I thought, how do I get out of this? And I hit on what I thought would be a foolproof plan. I told him, in the monastery, we have to ask the bhikkhu community. We have to ask the bhikshu community for anything like that. So you'll have to come to the meeting and submit your request. And then the community of fully ordained monks will consider this request. And so he said, I'll come, because I think I really want to do this with you. So anyway, we went to the meeting, and I sat there like butter wouldn't melt in my mouth. And my brother submitted his request. He said, "We haven't seen each other for a very long time. We were separated as children. I really want to go and play with my elder brother." And I was sitting there thinking, oh, I'm safe. I don't need to worry about this. There's no way the monastic community is going to send me off to Universal Studios. And so the monks thanked him for his request and said, "You can leave now, and the monks will consider this request." And then so my brother walked out, and then the brothers, all of them said, "You should go, Phap Hai, you need to go." And I thought, no. So anyway, the next day we went to Universal Studios. My brother was so happy. He was on cloud nine. And I was not experiencing the same emotion, but I was practicing the third immeasurable mind, the third Brahma Vihara of empathetic joy. I was enjoying his happiness, but he asked me to go on the roller coaster ride with him. So we went on the roller coaster ride, and it had been so long, I think 30 years at that point, since I'd been at an amusement park. It's not somewhere that we monastics go. And we have enough amusement looking at our minds. So anyway, I was sitting in the roller coaster, and it had been so long since I went there. It was all a mystery to me. And at the end of the ride, my brother jumped off the roller coaster and ran over to a little kiosk, and where there was an iPad, and he was scrolling through the iPad, and then he stopped at one picture and burst out laughing. And so I walked over, and he said, "Look at this." Everybody on the ride was going, so happy. And I was gripping onto the rail like this, closed eyes, and like my knuckles were white and everything. And my brother has a whole series of these photos in his house up in Brisbane. He loves, like, whenever I'm there, he brings them out. He loves to look at them. One person's happiness is not the same as another person's happiness. One person's experience of peace is not the same as another person's experience of peace. So when we ask ourselves these important questions, let's not stop at the big word. Let's always be willing to explore what we mean by that word, what it means for us, what our embodied experience of it is. Is it the same for other people? And what helps us to touch it right here and right now? And apart from these questions, what's the big question, that deep, almost silent longing of our heart? To have a question, and moreover to be questioning, is essential in Buddhism. To question everything until we find the truth right from within our own experience. This, I think, is the essence of queerness. And to know that not all questions have easy answers, and that rather than being an obstacle, it's an invitation. In Zen, we call this a koan, a question that has no logical answer, but that can open our heart and our mind completely. Many of us want easy answers, the soundbite. But to me, being queer means to resist that, to be willing not to settle, to be willing to go just a little bit further, to be willing to not know, and for that not knowing to be a source of strength and invitation rather than being an obstacle. It's also interesting to me that we often frame our questions from a basis of why. Sometimes this is good, but to me, often with these questions that are asked, there can be a sense of passivity. In Buddhism, a more powerful way to frame our questions, to frame our explorations, is to move towards a sense of how rather than why. When we reframe the question from a perspective of how something came to be, rather than remaining at the level of why, then this is empowering because it presupposes that A, we can understand how something came to be, and B, more importantly, we can do something about it. So let the deepest question of your heart be an invitation to keep moving forward. As I've shared before, to not settle. This is your koan, and this is how to work with a koan. I want to end my sharing this evening by sharing a radical invitation from the Buddha. In a famous teaching called the Simile of the Soul, the Buddha invited us to see the challenging people and situations of our life, rather than obstacles, as the very lens through which we generate love and healing. So that rather than loving everyone and then including that person or that situation, that person which is most difficult for us is the very lens through which we cultivate something real and something true. To love is not to be passive. It's not to say nothing. To love others, this world, ourselves, just as we are, is a fierce and a radical act indeed. To love is to call forth, and to be called forth not only once, but many times over. So, dear beloved community, I hope that some of these words might have been helpful for you. We're going to have a sound of the bell to come back to our breathing, and then we're going to be moving into breakout groups for a few minutes. I'd like to propose that as a discussion question, a starting point for our breakout groups, if it feels good for you, we can share with each other what the edge of our practice is, what the edge of our exploration is at this moment in time. This is my invitation for you this evening. So I'll invite a sound of the bell, and then we'll hear a little of the logistics of the breakout groups.
Welcome back, everyone. I think we have a couple of us left, probably in another room. Hope you enjoyed the conversations in the smaller groups. I believe some of us could go a little bit deeper and shed some great humor too. This is a time for us to share in the bigger meditation hall any other questions that we might have, either for the speaker or just to the bigger group. And anything that has moved you tonight, feel free to unmute yourselves and share with us. Yeah.
So I can share with the group. People are becoming more brave or coming forward with their own sharings or questions. But it was very good to meet some new friends in our group and some people from different countries. And we all talked about different challenges that we have in the Dharma. And I was reminded just how wonderful it is to come together with people who accept you, and I mean accept in the true sense of the word accept, not just as a token acceptance, and to feel that you can be yourself amongst those people. And so I'd like to thank Thay for his talk tonight, especially for encouraging us all to be ourselves. So often it's difficult for us in certain places, certain spaces, to truly be ourselves. So I'd like to thank Tay for that reminder, and to encourage other people here, if they have a comment or a question, to either write it in the chat or to raise your hand and unmute yourself. It's great to be here with so many people tonight. Let's make the most of this opportunity.
Just a shout out from Orla here before she left. Thank you all for co-creating such a beautiful space and for the deep teachings. Thank you, Orla.
Go on the Irish Sangha. Whoop, whoop.
Brother Phap Hai, may I ask a question? My name is Sin Sin. I am from Sydney. In our group today, we were talking, I actually brought it up. I was talking about the difference between tolerance and acceptance. I am originally from Indonesia, and I come from a community where, although queerness is celebrated and it's pervasive, it's sort of underground still. And it's a bit of a hush-hush situation. And there's still a lot of stigma and condemnation and unpleasant treatment in general. So I am really lucky that I think my family members have accepted me the way I am. But there is also a small group of people who, I was just saying that I think this whole thing seems so alien to them that for them to be able to come to terms with it and tolerate, it's not a nice word, but to tolerate this is good enough for me than fully embracing it or accepting it, if that makes sense. But then in your talk, you mentioned the importance of going further and then having a relentless heart and not settling on something just because it gives you the comfort zone, but you keep going and persist. But I also am aware of the possibility of pushing that further, alienating myself from the rest even further that way, because I thought, like, if they could tolerate me, that's sufficient, but perhaps maybe it's not. So how do you deal with such a thing? I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
I think this is a very good question, and it circles back to the fact that each of us is in a very unique situation while we share a commonality. Each of us is in a very unique situation. It's just like in terms of the cultures that we live in, the society that we live in, and also what feels right for us in terms of our journey. I remember a few years ago, I was asked to lead a retreat in a place called the Ojai Foundation. And I was very excited to see, they gave me a map of something called the Gratitude Walk. And they drew this beautiful map and put it next to the bed. And I thought, I'm going to do this gratitude walk. And the map had 3 words on it. And an hour it said, "You are here." And so I stepped out with a lot of confidence and I got completely lost. I retraced my steps back, and then I started again. I went in the other direction and I still couldn't find where I was supposed to be. And I until I sat down and I realized that while the 3 words "you are here" was true for the person who drew the map, it was not true for me. So I had to sit down, look at the map, understand that all those landmarks were there, and then to embark on the journey at the place in which I found myself. Each of us finds ourselves in a different place. And we also meet the landmarks on our journey at different times and in different ways. And we need to make the journey that, while there's a commonality, is unique to us. So for me, being relentless means to make our journey. We're not practicing, I think, like we often, we translate the words from Pali or from Sanskrit and we say, I practice the Dharma. And we treat the Dharma or whatever it might be as an object rather than an emerging experience. If you go to India or you study the original languages, there's also an element of practicing my Dharma. Of understanding that the Dharma is not an object or our journey is not an external thing, but it's a moment by moment experience. So being relentless means to show up for our journey just as it is. And for me, the difference that you were talking about getting comfortable and you know, of moving forward is that for me, when what I'm talking about falling into our comfort zones, I'm speaking about situations in which we kind of find a place where we hide away. And what you're describing is not a situation of hiding away, of editing yourself, of cutting yourselves out, but of choosing fully to be there and to be able to embrace the conditions that are there. So yeah, I feel that that is being relentless. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Brother Phap Hai. I guess it's just like what John is shared in the chat. It's like removing layers of an onion. It takes a bit of time, and having the practice being shown through action is indeed a lot more important than just having the words on the screen. So at this time, we might bring it back to Bhante Akaliko to share with us a little bit more about what Rainbodhi has in store in the upcoming days. And thank you, everyone, for your sharing and questions. They have been really enlightening. Thank you, Brother Phap Hai.
So thank you so much to Venerable Brother K. Phap Hai for your deep and far-ranging talk. I really appreciated the insights that you shared. And I just want to let the community here know that I am willing to be forced into roller coasters if necessary. And to also say that the work that you just spoke of is very much the work that Rainbodhi is doing. And I really do believe that all of our different traditions, when we come together and we talk about these things, it seems that we all have a shared experience. And we also have a shared knowledge of the difficulty of bureaucracy and slow-moving institutions. And so being here together with all of our friends from all around the world tonight, from different traditions, from different schools of Buddhism, from different countries, from different backgrounds, reminds me of the strength that we have in community. And I'd like to invite anyone who wants to suggest ways that we can move forward as a group. Rainbodhi is producing a book on inclusion and diversity for Buddhist organizations. And this kind of work, I think, means that individuals don't have to do all of the hard work. It means that we share the burden of creating change as a group. And that's always much easier. We have strength in numbers. Once again, I'd like to just thank Venerable Phap Hai for his generosity in sharing the Dharma tonight, and invite all of you to share the merits of our practice together, dedicating the merit of our good actions here today, thinking, may all beings be safe, may all beings experience love, may all beings be happy, and may all beings attain liberation. Thank you, Venerable Phap Hai. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hope to see you again at a Rainbodhi event soon.